Good morning. Good morning. I'm Nadine, the host of Just a Dog podcast, and this is my special guest making her debut on the podcast. She is called Duna, and she is a Spanish Greyhound, also known as a Galga, and she's my first foster dog. I got her on Saturday. She's available for adoption if anybody's interested. She's just the most gorgeous soul, and she's very food motivated. And she's just very gentle, very cuddly. She takes up a lot of space in bed at nighttime. She's a space hogger. But yeah, she's just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, if you're interested to know more, just contact Project Galgo, and the team will take care of you there. All right. Thank you, Duna. Thank you. Right. She's at her walk. She's had her number 1 and her number 2 and her breakfast, and she will likely go snooze now. Have her marathon snooze fest. Here you go, Duna. Enjoy your nap. Right, podcast episode for today. Hello, I'm Nadine. I am the podcast host for Just a Dog podcast. I wanted to hop on here before I press publish on this week's episode, and I wanted to make clear that I am not a dog trainer. I'm not a behaviorist. I am quite literally just a regular dog person, someone who loves dogs and who's basically started asking questions, and those questions have led to even bigger questions. And I have a natural interest in psychology, sociology, philosophy, obviously dogs and dog behavior. But yeah, I'm not a dog trainer, and I'm never going to be a dog trainer. But what I do know is that dog training has become quite the battlefield. It's a space where experts talk past each other, and the rest of us try and figure out what is actually best for our dogs. And so the advice out there can be quite contradictory. The debates are quite heated. And frankly, as a regular dog person, I find it confusing as hell. Especially since I started fostering recently. I didn't expect this to happen, but it's happened. I get unsolicited training advice constantly. And I know that most people mean well. And while I'm not an expert, I do know that I've realized that some of this advice could be quite harmful. And so that's made me wonder, if regular dog lovers are spreading misinformation without knowing it, then what about the professionals? Are they all working from the same evidence base? Is that empirical and scientific, or anecdotal and experience-based? Is the industry regulated? So is there a common standard for trainers that they are required to uphold? Do they all want what's best for dogs, even when those methods look completely different? Yeah. So you will learn that today's guest uses techniques that many would condemn outright. And my instinct was to do the same. I know that some people will be upset with me for giving him a platform. And to those people, I want to say I understand. For most of my life, I've been quite a black and white thinker. That's to say, I like for things to make sense, for them to fit neatly into a box that says this is right and this is wrong. But unfortunately, the world doesn't work like that. There are so many shades of grey. As a photographer, I could tell you that even white is 18% grey. So I've come to learn over time that actually black and white thinking is lazy thinking. And now I try my best to understand the grey areas where I can, because if I don't, I will be a very grumpy person, because life just won't fit neatly into my right or wrong boxes. So yeah. dismissing perspectives just doesn't help us understand what actually works, and what works for us immediately might not work for the dog's well-being in the long term. So this begs the question, do we care more about results and immediate outcomes, or do we look at our dogs and our responsibility towards them holistically? And at what point do we take action to avoid being desperate and reactive and making decisions based, coming from that place? So this topic is so broad, it's so nuanced, and it's so layered and complex. And there were moments that I felt completely out of my depth, and you will probably hear that. And that's okay, because this conversation is merely a stepping stone to understanding a little bit more. And I am comfortable with you seeing that process. And I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I genuinely don't know. I tend to use my morals and values as a guiding compass. But even saying that, there's a lot that I don't know that I don't know. And I want to know more. So I'm here because someone needs to ask the uncomfortable questions, and there will be other dog owners who are thinking the same, but they might not be able to articulate it. And so I believe that if we can have these conversations, we can stay focused on the dogs, because ultimately it is them who pay the price. And this isn't about agreeing with everything that we hear. It is about understanding enough to make better decisions for the dogs in our care. So without further ado, today's guest is Jack Tutty. Jack started his dog training journey young. He was working with severe behavioral cases in kennels for about 5 years under an experienced mentor with a background in the military. This hands-on experience with rehabilitation and rehoming led Jack to found J&P Canine Academy. And so for the past 4 years, Jack has focused on competitive IGP work. We'll learn more about that shortly. Titling his Rottweiler, whilst helping dog owners across the country through one-to-one lessons, workshops, and of course, through his social media presence. I stumbled upon his Instagram account and I saw his videos, and I immediately thought, wow, he is very articulate. He is someone who is quite opinionated, and I was curious to learn more and just have an open and respectful conversation. And so I reached out to Jack, and he thankfully accepted my invitation. And so this is part 1 of our conversation. Part 2 will be available from Thursday next week. But yeah, I hope that you find this conversation insightful. I hope that you will join me in the spirit of openness, and, share your thoughts and views in a respectful way, and be part of the conversation. Let's help to elevate each other in terms of our understanding and shared knowledge and experience. So without further ado, here's our interview. Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on. So let's get started. I would love to know more about you. Please tell me, first of all, a bit more about your background and also your dogs.
So my background started quite a while ago now. I hit 30 this year, so we're getting a little bit less open about admitting about how long we've been in dogs. But we've been I think it's about 16 years now of my life. So it's practically speaking, my adult life. But I started out working with red line rehabilitation, effectively. Severe behavioural cases that were due either for destruction or had some sort of court order on them from bite histories and so on and so forth. And so when I was about 14 or 15, it was a very different time. Health and safety was probably a different place. But when I was like 14, 15, I learned under the wing of a sort of military dog handler, Graham, who was a fantastic mentor in so many ways. And yeah, it just sort of evolved from that. And then and from that point, I spent a lot of time working in the rescues, rehabbing and rehoming these dogs, getting them. I mean, it's quite a significant difference when you can walk a dog out in a nice polite heel, stop in front of the person, like the person that's come in to rescue it. If they see a dog that is biddable and cooperative, obviously there was a lot of help for these people when we transitioned them over, but those dogs are the dogs that left quickly. You get me? And sometimes the cases that you got were just that dog didn't belong on a destruction order. It was just mishandled or whatever it might be. So that's where I started. Fast forward to my early 20s, and I opened J&P. And J&P has basically been a one-to-one pet service where I've been helping people with their pets. I specialise mostly, or I get probably most of my work with pets is done for reactivity, resource guarding, your sort of big overt problems. That tends to be what I've seemed to have fallen into as a dog trainer with my clients, at least. And my boys, put it in a nutshell, Maska, my Rottweiler, he's my working competition dog, so I'll be competing with him in the near future, and hopefully getting a nice couple of titles on him. And Dude is a dog that was originally going to be a rehab and rehome, but he challenged me enough to stay, would be the best way to describe it, would be the best way to articulate that. So that's sort of like, if I was to nutshell it best I can, that's sort of like the origin story, as it were.
What is a working competition dog?
So in this context, it would be an IGP dog. So IGP is a competitive dog sport, a bite dog sport, where there are effectively three sections of it. You have your bite work element, your protection element of it, you have your tracking element of it, and you have your obedience element of it. And the dog has to be able to perform a sequence of complicated behaviors and show a high level of control and also a high level of expression and exactness with regards to the work that they do. And it's something to aim at, and I think that's very important for dog owners and people in the canine industry. You've got to have something to aim at. So I think that's a big reason why I sort of leaned into that, because I sort of ran out of things that really excited me about pet dog training at one point, and I needed to go and get into a different pond where I was the smallest fish. And so from that point, it just sort of grew from there. But that was 4 years ago now. Maska's 4.5 now.
What do you call it again? You used an acronym. IGP?
Oh, IGP, yes. Do not if you ask me to pronounce what that stands for, I haven't got the German dialect down. So it used to be called Schutzhund back in like the early 1900s. It used to be called Schutzhund.
Right. Okay. I'm completely new to this world. Is this the type of dog training where they usually, I think I've seen some videos of Belgian Malinois like heading towards a dude with a massive suit on, like a sumo suit.
Similar. So in IGP, it's not a suit; it's a jute sleeve. You'll have seen it. I imagine, in different contexts. But yeah, it's in the same vein as that. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. And what other than for the trainer or the owner is the benefit for the dog?
Oh, what a good question. So for Maska, you have to understand the character of these dogs. So you have to understand that this is not the same thing as, even if somebody bought the exact same breed, Maska in particular has been bred. His dad was a world champion in this particular sport, and that creates a very substantive character with regards to the dog. Very intense. There's a lot of behaviors. There's a lot of genetic proclivities that a lot of pet owners would never ever want in a dog. And it's important to sort of, I think, in the work that I do, differentiate the work that I do with my working dog and the work that I do with my clients' pet dogs, because genetically they're extremely different animals. But for Maska, that fulfillment of, this might sound a bit odd to some people, but when Maska goes and bites people once a week, it's his favorite day of the week. And as a result of that, what happens is the dog learns that if he wants access to this extremely valuable thing, that he has to go through the handler to get access to it, or through his dad to get access to it. And that creates such synergy in your relationship when it can be executed well. And it gives the dog, you've got to understand that these dogs are in a fighting, emotive headspace when they're doing these things. And so it's as much like if you have a boxer go into a boxing ring, he's not going to be super chilled and relaxed. He's going to be ready, and he's going to be, moving around, but he's going to also have some form of forward aggression, because that's involved in the sport that he's doing. And so what's really nice about that is that you can teach the dog to control these more extreme ends of their emotions through these outlets and through these expressions of what would normally be considered antisocial behavior.
Right. Okay. So okay, but that is limited only to a competition environment. How do they
No,
switch off that part of them in a urban environment or not?
so that's again a really good question. So for IGP in particular, there's a lot of setup. So there's a lot of the routine in IGP remains the same. So for instance, Maska understands that he's going to go do bite work, and it's contextualized to that field, and it's also contextualized to permission. Like there may be it's never happened. There may be a situation where Maska is asked to perform those behaviors outside of that picture, but the key with it is creating stability around that picture as well. So you want stability throughout the dog's behavior. If you're going to show them these extreme ends of their character, you have to also show them, hey, listen, you can't just be like this everywhere. You've got to cooperate. You practice cooperative skills with the dog. You make yourself immensely valuable to listen to the dog, but you also add consequence in for if the dog was to get it wrong. If the dog was to, for instance, assume that he was to go into that state of mind in a situation when you don't want him to, you have to be able to adequately interrupt and explain that to the dog in a way that produces the clarity, where the dog goes, okay, I made a mistake there, And I think that's it's a really important question. I think a lot of people who think about protection sports, they see it, or protection work, they see it almost as like I don't really know how to describe it. They see it as sort of like a very combative, sort of very, very gritty thing. And I think actually it's a beautiful thing. To see the dog express its biology and who he is to the extent that they do it in these sports, and then to on top of that have so much clarity that they know when to switch that on and switch that emotion off. I think that's beautiful dog training in anyone's book. But I do think it's very important.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can actually see and understand how dogs, as you call it, with a certain biological proclivity, would benefit from their innate nature being expressed in a controlled environment. I can see that. I guess it's similar to a sight hound. I don't know.
Chase and prey. It would be it is that. It is, and this is
Yeah,
important.
you don't want it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
like at the same time, the opposite of expression is suppression, and so you have to consider that if the dog is not allowed anywhere to express that part of themselves, then this can cause a lot of conflict in the relationship with the dog, or between the dog and the handler. I say a lot of conflict. It can definitely cause some. It can definitely cause rifts between the dog and the handler, because depending on what the genetic proclivities are, it can sort of express in different directions, if that makes sense.
Okay. So do you have any examples of what that might look like? The
Of course.
directions?
So one of the more common and easy examples is collies chasing cars. That's probably one of the easier examples I could give you, right? So they have this genetic urge to control the movement of fast-moving objects and other animals. There's a genetic proclivity for that. Now, if I invent a game with a collie that involves those genetic drives are seen as sort of socially acceptable, aren't they? And they're okay to express and whatever else. But equally, if you get a very, very well bred collie from bred from cattle lines, these are often very forward, very confident, very willing to bite, very, very sort of confrontational animals, because they stand up against these huge, huge cattle, and they have to have that character. And so when you have a dog that's bred like that, a collie that's bred like that, and you have a collie that's bred, for instance, just with two pet collies that have been found together, you have the same breed and maybe it's the same genetic proclivity, but you have different levels of expression that's required for these two dogs. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
But another example would be bull breeds. Bull breeds are a really common one that I work with. I love bull breeds. My girlfriend has a bloody bull breed downstairs, Bruno. But I've always had a bull breed. But like bull breeds like to fight, and whether or not that's socially acceptable or not, again, doesn't really matter. What we have to look at is the biology of the dog. And if I, again, don't allow for a controlled expression of that element of the dog, then that element has to go somewhere else. It'll pop up you suppress it over here, it's going to pop up over here. But if I teach the dog how to play a competitive game with me, that this game has rules, and if you break the rules, you might even get in trouble, you know. And when I have that sort of understanding and that cooperation between me and the dog, at that point, it's very easy to start getting through behavioral problems, because the dog is, is committing itself every time it's going out to play with you. And I think that's, and for bull breeds especially, or dogs that like to bite and rag, these are things that need to be expressed in the dog. And I think that society's proclivity is to suppress them. And I think it's just knowing how to do it properly that people really struggle with the most.
Right. With bullies, I was just, for context, just recently published a podcast episode with Sophie Coulthard, who,
Yes,
I don't know if you, yeah. And
yeah.
as a result of that interview, I had a trainer reach out to me saying, you know, when are you going to interview a trainer? Basically.
Oh, right, I see.
And I was like, guess what? Monday.
There we are.
Exactly. And he was basically asking me to ask you questions. So I've got a long list of questions. I don't know if we'll be able to get through it, but
yeah, I love questions. I say this to all my workshops. I said, if you don't ask questions, I've either done my job very, very well, or nobody's listening to what I'm saying.
I love that. You know? Well, I love that you're so open to this, because honestly, it's impossible to have open conversations these days.
I won't get off into the woods with this, but my general philosophy in life is that the moment that we refuse to have conversations about contentious or argumentative points is the moment that we don't ever come to a solution. You know, we have to, like, I'm very happy to talk to anyone at any point, and if anyone has any critiques or anything that they want to throw back at me, that's something I actually quite enjoy combating with, because I think it's like maybe a personality trait or something. But when somebody offers me something, oh, have you thought about it this way? I genuinely go, I don't know, have I? You know, like, and then I try my best to, anyway. Not always successful.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. It's the same here. I think sometimes we don't realize the things that are so attached to our sense of being or our identity, and being able to reflect on that and challenge ourselves is hard.
It's hard
because we like to know who we are.
Yeah, and the human. So a lot of my job is dealing with people, not dogs. And what I've found with people is that people have a tendency to stick to what they know, and even when that thing is proving to be detrimental to them at points. And I think that ideological consumption sometimes can really hold anyone, not just dog trainers, but anyone back. So I think it's important. You know?
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because I recently saw maybe a psychologist, it could have been, and it really resonated with me what she was saying. She was saying that resilience, she was asking people, what is resilience? And nobody could really give her an accurate description. Oh, tell me.
I think I could give a good answer. Resilience is, if I'm going to speak about it broadly from a biological standpoint, I can give it in a quite short answer. I think resilience is the organism's ability to bounce back after something aversive happens, and the time frame that takes. So, for instance, when we're testing dogs for like a protection dog role, we're looking for resilience. And so when you learn to identify it, it's quite simple, really. Like, if a loud bang goes off and that puppy gets a bit of a fright, but then in the next second he's like, oh, okay, I'm fine. That's quite a resilient puppy. Or if you even better than that would be a loud bang, the puppy doesn't even blink. It's like, I'm not arsed, you know? So I would say that would be my definition anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think there's lots of different ways to explain something. But I think you are correct.
I would.
The definition that I heard from this person was, they said, when it comes to identity, you have a sense of knowing and a sense of not knowing. And in the middle is uncertainty. And when you're in the middle and things are uncertain, that's a sticky spot, because people don't like not knowing. And so resilience is how long you can stay in that spot without wanting to attach to either extreme.
That makes sense. And I think that that sort of lends to the whole idea that the truth lies in the middle. And more of the truth lies in the middle than at the extremes ever. And I think, And I think that when you've got one, so for instance, the dog training industry you mentioned before, very polarizing. And I think the biggest reason for that would be the emotionality that is wrapped up in our dogs and how much we love them. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I'm saying that the predominant emotion towards our dogs is this sort of like unabounding love, particularly with dogs that have maybe been through something. Where actually, if we look at things to maybe sort of tie it into that resilience point, if I actually want to develop a dog properly, I want to develop the dog to be confident, and I want to develop the dog to have an ability that when something stressful does happen, that he understands how to deal with it instead of just reacting in an emotion that he has no control over. So a very easy example of this with puppies is that if I'm out and about and my puppy starts barking at something because it's spooked, I walk it right over to it. Like, come on, let's go see. And then the puppy will pull back and it'll be like, I don't want to do it. And you'll be like, no, 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 come on, you'll be fine. And then the puppy realizes, well, nothing's wrong here. I was being silly. And the puppy learns that that emotion is not always warranted when he thinks it's warranted. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yes. I'm just wondering how much of that is... Firstly, how old is the puppy?
Well, that was sort of a vague example, but
Oh, okay.
I don't think to some degree, I don't think it matters all too much. Now, again, I'm not saying puppy gets scared of something, drag it over there. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if I see that you have a bit of a negative reaction towards this thing, and let's say it's not warranted, it's not a tiger or something, it's not like something like horrible in the environment. If I see that the puppy is pulling back and like, I'm not sure about this, I want to show the puppy what the steps are to overcoming that emotion. And what the steps are they're never walk away from it and let the puppy think that that's a big scary thing and it's justified to be scared of it. So Maska was very famous in our little dog training group when I first got him because he started barking at rocks, like big rocks that were sticking out of the ground. He's just weird, just being odd, just an odd little puppy. And if I'd played into that fear and said that, oh, well, he's scared, so I'm not going to push him, what I would have got is probably a dog that learns to interact with the environment at least a little bit more like that, from a place of insecurity rather than from a place of confidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. The Yeah, I think, it's such a tricky thing, really, isn't it? Because I've noticed more recently than previously that puppy breeders are handing the dogs over well before they're supposed to. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if somebody heard that, as in what you just shared, which is a little bit out of context because you work as a trainer. They might think it's okay to do that. Because I have taken a puppy course before, and they have explained that there is something such as introducing micro stressors in a puppy pack, and that could be something as gentle and as simple. It's not like huge stress. It's not like you taking I don't know, food and placing it 5 kilometers away and say, oh, you go find your you know what I mean? It's not like that. It's like
Fully.
the
So,
micro little find this, or like sniff because they
but
can't see, or
I,
whatever.
I think though, with that level of nuance towards this kind of conversation, I think what can get difficult from now, as a trainer, my job is to communicate ideas and to communicate how to handle your dog and how to effectively communicate the ideas that you want the dog to understand. All right. And so I also, when I'm working with a dog, I don't think there's many contexts that I would say that taking a dog through very small amounts of stress over a much longer period of time is better than maybe the dog going through a bit of a stressful session, but then realizing within that session, so on the same session, in the same 10 minutes, in the same 20 minutes, that reaction is unwarranted. So I agree, maybe that was maybe of a perhaps a brash way of saying it, but I think the principle still lies underneath it, which is that it wasn't that long ago that our dogs were able to be let out the door or go for a walk around the block and let themselves back in. And what's happened since that point is that there has been this, what would you say, this softening of dog ownership. Now, in a lot of ways, I actually really like the softening of dog ownership. I think we're much kinder to our dogs. We're much more loving. I think that's a fantastic. And by the way, I've dedicated my life to dogs. You'll find you'll maybe you won't find it hard because obviously you've got a podcast talking about this subject. But in normal day-to-day life, you're going to have a hard time finding somebody who spends more time thinking about dogs and loving on his dogs than me. Um, I, I, the question is what is truly kind for the dog? Is it kind
Yes.
to
What is an appropriate level of
yeah,
stress?
exactly. Now, the thing is, if I take a puppy to a really busy environment when it's dead young, let's say 9 weeks, 8 weeks in that region, 7 weeks in that region, the puppy's brain isn't
Far too
really
young.
the puppy's brain isn't really doing anything at that age, and so like it's just like nothing between his head, and it's just happening sort of to him, and that's a little bit different. Now, there is a strong argument to be made that, like, so for instance, when I went to pick Maska up, the pen that these puppies were in were filled with things that were making loads of noise, and all the puppies had become completely desensitized to it because we had a speaker playing gunshots, we had rattle canisters on the side of the thing, and the puppies were just playing in it and jumping in it and jumping out of it. Now, obviously, genetically, these are quite confident pups, but that lends to their confidence again is that when something like this happens in real life, that they have experience that they can fall back on, that they can go, oh, actually, that's not a big deal. And I think the difficult language around positive reinforcement and punishment or correction or whatever else does slow that conversation down, because people hear stress and they think the dog is like this, and it's like, no, there's a spectrum of stress. Like a kid going to nursery for the first time is a great example of this. A kid going to the nursery is crying, I want to stay with mom, I absolutely don't want to do it. It's because of the unknown. It's because the kid doesn't know yet. And lo and behold, the kid goes through a little bit of a stressful day, but then the next day he's a little bit more willing to go. And then it gets easier for the kid, and then the kid learns to enjoy the time with his friends and enjoy the time and maybe even enjoy the stress that sort of structured environment can produce. People need to talk about stress in a much more nuanced way. Instead of it being just stress is negative, stress is important. Stress builds as well as destroys. So we have to have and again, this is where the nuance in this industry has gone to zero. We can't have a genuine conversation without emotive language, like the fact that I use tools in my dog's training, the fact that I'll use a slip lead, the fact that I'll use a prong collar is very, very contentious to people. And
Ooh.
the frustrating thing about that for me is, well, a lot of the time people have never actually spent any amount of time figuring out what these things were designed for, who they were designed by,
Amazing.
or
I want to
or that
know.
you know, well, absolutely. So, well, let's start with the prong collar. The prong collar is probably the easiest one. The prong collar was developed by a guy called Herm Springer, and it was developed to reduce tracheal damage on working dogs. It was not developed originally as a corrective tool. What it was designed for was because a lot of the police dogs and a lot of the working dogs at the time, they had slip leads or they had flat collars. They were, because they were pulling and they were like police dogs, pulling into this all the time. It was causing a lot of damage. And so a veterinary engineer decided to try and develop this collar that would distribute pressure across rounded points on the dog's neck. So the dogs experience more of a sensation when the collar became active. And lo and behold, to this day, prong collars are above harnesses, by the way, are the least physically damaging tools to a dog to wear. It's observable because again, it is designed from a central plate to distribute that pressure around the neck. But people hear prong
Okay.
collar and they think I'm stabbing the dog in the side of the neck, and actually that's not at all what the prong collar is designed to do.
So what about, okay, that's physical. What about emotional?
I think emotional depends on the person, on the tool that's holding the tool. And I think that's one of the really important things that is the most important thing, I think, about this conversation about tools. I have spent years developing my ability to teach people and learn myself with these tools. And if we approach it from a common sense point of view and a fair point of view from the dogs, these tools can speed up the training for the dog and make the world clearer. And I think that if I'm able to take a few options off the table, so for instance, the collie chasing cars, if I say you're just not going to do that, that's just not allowed. Because the alternative would be, now the way that I would do that is in some shape or form, I might give the dog a correction. Now, there might be other situations where I'm not going to give that dog a correction, but let's, for the sake of this conversation, say that I did. I gave the dog a correction, let's say on a little prong collar. I gave it a little pop on the lead as it lunged into the traffic. People want to say that there are better ways of doing that. I just cannot see it. Like, it's not observable. Like, if I create an aversion to something, And then the dog shows clarity after that. And the car goes by and the dog's maybe a wee bit nervous about that correction, but then it's up to me after that to help the dog rebuild and come back and be like, okay, I can do this. And again, it's feeding back into the point about resilience, is that if I tell you no and you fold into a puddle on the ground, well, that's not a good way of approaching life. You have to show some resilience. You have to show some confidence. You have to show some ability to bounce back from these things, because the world is going to give you that at some point. And I think if I expose my dog to these stressors or these corrections or punishments, whatever word you'd like to use, and if I teach the dog what these things mean, that means no, it means come back to me, and if you come back to me, there's no pressure. Good boy, well done, super job. As opposed to if I teach the dog like that, or opposed to I just put a prong collar on a dog lunges at the car and I go bang, that's unethical. That's not fair on the dog. But if I show the dog what I expect and then the dog tries it again, I go, that's bad for your health, mate. And I think we've got to a point in society where correcting a dog for lunging at traffic is controversial. And I think that that's insane. I truly do. I truly do.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if you think about it, it's, we live in a human-centric world with working dogs in urban environments. And
Absolutely.
then these dogs get punished for showing innate behaviors that they were born with.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's challenging. That's what I grapple with, especially when it comes to aversives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The only place where I would imagine it could
And by the way, feel
work.
absolutely free. Feel absolutely free to disagree with me. Like I say, I enjoy a bit of pushback.
Oh, that's okay. I think it's a delicate conversation to have, and the thing is, without wanting to be overly diplomatic about it, I'm just gonna come right out and say I'm pro positive reinforcement. However,
So am I.
yes, okay,
So am
this
I.
is great, because
Yeah.
I was going to ask you actually. You were saying you use aversive. So what I would like to understand is, when it comes to the world of dog training, what are the different types? I just don't know what they are. I've heard of R+, I've heard of positive reinforcement, I've heard of balanced. I don't know what that means. Could you maybe explain to me, from your perspective, what are the different types and what do they mean?
It's a good question, but I think it's a trap. Not necessarily you're setting a trap for me. I think the trap that people fall into with these categories is that they are simply ways of us quantifying how a person approaches something. So like, I have many friends in this industry that are force free. And equally, I have many balance trainers that don't like me. The R plus and the force free movement. The R plus is sort of synonymous with force free movement, at least from my perspective. But the R plus movement is effectively that dogs not only don't need to be punished to learn, to develop their full potential, as it were, but actually that it's detrimental, and the only way that the dog, or the best way that the dog learns, or the kindest way that the dog always learns, is solely through some form of positive reinforcement, whether it be food or toy or whatever it might be. Now, what a lot of people don't appreciate, I don't think, is just how much time I spend getting good at positive reinforcement and how much knowledge. And I actually see more effective and more nuanced and more, what would you say, more complicated uses of positive reinforcement from the balanced community. And, like as a very easy example, a very easy concept for people to maybe wrap their head around is, you do not decide what is positively reinforcing to your dog, ever. Your dog decides what's positively reinforcing to your dog. And just like you don't decide what's punishing to your dog, the dog decides what's punishing to it. And the trickiest part about this is that I think when the industry sort of blurts out that no dog needs to ever be told and corrected for something that they might have done, I think they neglect a lot of these genetics in these dogs. And it's usually that they just simply have not had a lot of experience with them, because if they did, if I was to give the average person my Rottweiler, it probably wouldn't go too well, because he's a very intense working dog and is not designed to be a chill on the couch sort of pet. Now, that doesn't mean to say that he can't do that with me, but that took years of building up a good relationship with that dog, and rapport and trust and consistency that involved punishment, that involved me taking a few things off the table for the dog. Because when you have those powerful, powerful dogs, your Cane Corsos, your Rottweilers, your German Shepherds, your Malinois, whatever it might be. Now, there's definitely exceptions to this. You get very, very soft Malinois and you get very, very intense Malinois. And depending on which breeding pool you pick from, you're going to get different results with regards to how you can train those dogs. Like I, for instance, know that Joe Rosie is a very famous, fantastic 4-3 trainer. She has a Malinois, but the Malinois, you can see the Malinois has a love. She's a nice dog. She's a very, very, like, I don't mean to take anything away because her training is fantastic. I'm not taking anything away, but the character of her dog is conducive with her method, is what I would say. That's probably the best way to describe it. I think when the character starts changing a lot, and maybe you've got a very confrontational character or a character that has his own ideas about what training should be, I think that you have to have a real honest conversation. Sometimes I have a 55-kilo woman bring me a 50-kilo dog, and I have to give that woman something that gives her some physical control back, because the alternative is that she gets dragged around and the dog doesn't get taken out. And there's no nuance for that position, you know?
Well, I would argue, why have the
Go on.
dog in the first place?
So would I. So would I. Absolutely. Absolutely. So would I. That would be my first argument, believe me. But if that is the position that we're in, and that's the client that's come through my door, I have to help them. That's what they're paying me to do. I'm not, like, a lot of trainers might feel like it's their place when a client comes in to go, you shouldn't have this dog. I've maybe said that twice in my career to somebody, to their face, like straight away. And it's because, just flat out, one of them was an 82-year-old woman who had had a stroke earlier in her life, and she had bought a cattle bred collie. And I just said to her, listen, you just cannot do this to this dog. You're going to make him neurotic. You have to put this dog into a working role, put this dog into some form of work. She didn't want to hear it. That dog has now been put to sleep. So, like, I I think it gets difficult for people around the emotional language of correction and punishment, because they have an emotional reaction to it. They have a visceral, like, oh, I don't like the sound of that. And I think that knee jerk is actually what creates the opinion. And I think that if they had spent time with people who understand punishment and the effective moral and ethical use of it in training, they would change their mind pretty quickly.
Do you get more challenging dogs from the working dogs that are frustrated, or do you get those more challenging cases from, I don't know, Labradors and Golden
It really,
Retrievers and smaller dogs?
I hate to sound like a politician, but it really does depend. An easy example: if I get a proper working line Labrador, maybe like a Drake's Head Labrador, a creme de la creme of Labradors, that dog, if it is left unfulfilled, if the genetics of that dog are left at a point where they have a lot of energy and tension left at the end of the day, that could turn into things like resource guarding with Labradors. That's actually quite common. But then equally, if you've got a show line lab that has been bred for the show ring, then that's bred to be touched, and that's bred to be stable, and that's bred to be pretty slow down and like pretty steady as a dog. And this is where pet owners really should consider the genetics that they're buying. And in my opinion, there's nowhere near enough education on this. Um, but the people buying dogs that they maybe like the look of, or like the sound of, or they
Yeah.
like the idea of, but I can guarantee that this is why the rescues in this country are completely full. But there's many reasons, in my opinion, why the rescues are full. But yeah, I think the whole difficulty was saying, okay, is it more this breed or that breed? I think it's more case by case.
Yeah.
More often than not, you're going to see more problematic behaviors with working dogs that are in pet homes, more often than not. With regards to like dogs that are sort of designed to be pets, you're obviously not going to get them as much. And this is where people need to understand that just because you might have owned dogs for a long period of time, like I've driven a car for a long period of time, it doesn't make me a mechanic. And I think that that's really important for people to understand, is that yes, you might have experience with your dogs, but I've worked more dogs this week than you have your entire life. And I think that, and that's not to, maybe that sounded slightly abrasive, but maybe the Scottish accent, to be fair.
Well,
But
you've got more, yeah, you've got more exposure to a variety of different types of dog personalities, breed
exactly
types.
this, with this. And I think one of the things that I think people could really do with focusing on with dogs is assuming that they don't have the answer. Because a lot of people assume that they do have an answer, or they at least have a guess, a good guess as to what's going on with their dogs. And I would say in 90%, maybe not 90, that's perhaps a little bit too, maybe about 75% of cases, you're wrong. And it's that the dog is actually maybe kicking off or pulling for completely different reasons than what you think it is. And because of that, the way that you're approaching that problem is starting in completely the wrong place. So you'll never actually make any progress with the dog because you're starting at a start line that is not that isn't the start line of your race, if that makes sense.
So how could owners get closer to the most accurate starting point of what their challenges might be?
I think research is number one. Now, research is a very broad term, I realize, and maybe perhaps a bit vague, but let's say you have a dog that's more aligned with a working genetic or a working standard of a dog, then you want to find a trainer that has experience and evidence that they can actually deal with these dogs and evidence that they can handle them. One of the really unfortunate things that I see from the other side of the pond, from the force-free side of the pond, is a lack of willingness to even touch these dogs. You know, they'll train them from a distance, and I always say to people, like, how do you expect to get to know a dog and actually truly help that dog if you don't take their lead? And if that dog really wants to hurt you, as a dog trainer, you should be qualified enough to take that dog's lead and handle it for the dog, and then produce a good outcome for the dog after it. Or at least that should be what you're aiming at as a dog trainer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see that. What was your original
Why
question?
do
I'm
you?
so sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm
It's okay.
flip-flopping all over the place. I'm curious because this podcast is meant to be about reflection, and I'm wondering why. So we've got things like breed-specific legislation causing a whole host of problems for a whole host of people around the country. And then we live in urban environments, and we, tend to buy, working dogs and expect them to survive and thrive in an urban environment. I'd love to understand from your perspective and your experience, why do people buy these dogs?
Ooh. If I could answer that one, I think I'd be able to put my head on the pillow a bit easier at night. So 100 years ago, the only reason that you would buy a dog is if you had a job for it to do, if you had something for it to do. And what happens when you buy an animal and that happens after it is that the life that animal lives is in alignment with the job that it's been bought to do. And so the dog naturally has purpose. The dog has a reason to get out of its bed in the morning and actually go and do something with its owner.
Yeah, same as us. We need the same.
Precisely the same. It's a mammalian requirement. It's not just dog or human. It's mammalian. We have to have a reason to be moving, whether that be food, shelter, procreation, whatever it might be, resources, whatever it might be. But the purpose structures the dog's life. So what it does is it takes things off the table a little bit. It says, okay, if I'm going to buy you as a guard dog for this junkyard, let's say, as a easy example, then that is the parameter of your life. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing to do to a dog, but at least the dog has a comprehension, and they've obviously bought that dog because that's the type of dog that will deal with somebody coming into a junkyard. And that dog now is being told to sit in a puppy class next to 17 cavapoos and be told, give us a paw. It's not fair on the animal. It's not fair on the people that own the animal because they're being misinformed about what these dogs need. If you're my general thing with these classes is that if everyone is getting the same advice and you look around and you see a bunch of different dogs, that's immediately a huge red flag. If everyone is being told to do the same things as one another, massive red flag. That just shows a lack of flexibility, a lack of ability to read the character individually. And I actually forgot what the question was again. I'm so sorry.
But it's more about why do people buy these dogs when they are not fit for purpose in the environment that they will be raised?
Sometimes it's ego. So I think sometimes it can be ego. You know, I've bumped into quite a few people who, because I train high drive, quite intense dogs a lot, they buy a Malinois and they expect me just to be their best friend. And actually they've bought this Malinois because they watched John Wick and they liked it in John Wick, and they have no idea what a Malinois is and what a Malinois requires. Those are the worst those are the people that I will actually turn away, because the argument of, oh, you know, you could help them if you brought them on, they don't. A lot of these people, in order to learn something like how to raise a Malinois, you have to do it on purpose. And you cannot do it if you're starting from now. Again, maybe people will be able to change their minds over time, fine. But I will not make that dog what you want it to be. I will not tell your 3,000 mile an hour working dog to slow down, because that's not what he's
Yeah.
bred to do, and that's not who he is. And a lot of trainers will, and a lot of trainers will ascribe the same character traits to a Cavapoo as to that dog, and that's unfair, and that's really truly unfair on that dog, you know.
Yeah. Why do you think trainers tend to take on those cases knowing that,
They pay the bills.
you know?
They pay the bills. I wish I had a more politically correct answer, but like, genuinely speaking, the vast majority, unless you're a bit deeper into this game and you can sort of be a bit more picky about who you work with, the first year of you becoming a dog trainer, after 5 years of being smashed up in rescues and bitten and all kinds of stuff, the first year is you just taking on cases that are probably not going to go as far as you'd like them to go, because the people are not committed to the idea of actually training the dog. They want to fix a problem. And if we're talking about reflection in this episode, that's actually something that people should really, really, in my opinion, reflect on, is that if you have a problem with your dog and you're constantly taking the dog out trying to fix the problem all the time. There's a really famous quote about downhill skiing, and it's the coaches tell them, don't look at the fucking trees, because you'll go into what you look at. And when you focus on the problem becomes naturally bigger, and it becomes a more encompassing part of your dog's personality, until all somebody can see when they take their dog outside is the dog's behavioral problem.
Yeah.
You have to
Which
you have
aren't
to find a way of
problems.
doing that. No, well, it depends. Like, you know, you're going to have cases where the dog is aggressing because it wants to be aggressive. It wants to be powerful. My Presa Canario is a very good example of this. This dog enjoys and is very reinforced by controlling things and controlling people. And if he can bully you and influence your behavior a bit through a bit of force, then he'll be cheeky and he'll try these things. And he enjoys that from an internal place. So that is a problem. That is something that he's got to know. Hey, bro, you can't bully people. It's just not allowed.
How do you know that?
Because I see how he interacts with new people, and I see how he interacts with people who he understands. So he interacts with a very good example would be, if, let's say, you were in this room now and I let Dude come in, he'd walk up to you like a big puppy and he would give you the side of his body, you'd give him a scratch, he'd maybe walk away from you again, and you would go to leave the room or something like that, and he'd be like, no, and he'd go in front of you and he'd push you back a little bit. Now at this point, and the thing is, if you went, no, get out of my way, he'd have a little bit of a row with you. He'd have a little bit of like, no, you're not going to push me out of the way. And that's the kind of dog he is. Now, what that dog needs in his life is somebody to be accountable to that is not himself. And so if let's say that was to happen, if I was to go, dude, no, he understands that no is followed by a consequence unless there is a change of behavior. And so that's what I mean with the proper conditioning and application of punishment. That's what it should look like. Is I go, no, and my dog goes, oh, okay. I'm not going to mess around with that, because it's historically not been worth messing around with. And Dude understands that now, and he knows where the boundaries of these behaviors with other people are. But I watch how he interacts with people he likes and people he's testing. That's how I learn. That's how I learn.
Do you live in the countryside?
No, I live in the middle of Blackpool.
Is it okay? Okay. Is it? I'm not goading you in any way, but
No.
is it an
I know you're going to
appropriate
ask.
environment for your dog?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, I think a lot of people, when they think about taking their dog outside, they think about going on a walk with the dog. I don't really do that with my dogs. If I go outside with my dogs, I go outside and we have a purpose-driven session. So we have a session that is designed to fulfill the needs and the requirements of my dogs. Whether that be, we're going to put you on a back tie and you can bark and you can be loud, and we're going to throw this tug around and you can bite the tug. Or whether that be that you're going to concentrate on obedience for the next 15 minutes and we're going to keep that really reinforcing and make it feel like a game. Or whether it be that we're going to go track and we're going to go we're going to go very sort of meditative tracking for dogs. So we're going to go do that, and that requires a different headspace. So the question is not necessarily where do you live with the dog. The question is more, what are you willing to do to fulfill the dog's needs in spite of where you live, in spite of your environment. You know, my dogs go to places that I know that is good for them to train, that they get exposure to loads of things, that they can interact with the environment in a lot of ways safely. And on top of that, my dogs fundamentally know that if we go out with dad, me and dad are doing something together. And that that concept is something that I think a lot more people should focus on with their dogs instead of just aimlessly walking in a straight line.
Yeah. So quality, not quantity. That people tend to think of, having dogs, taking them for walks as that being the only requirement. Really, kind of just exhaust them, run, 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 run. Come back
Yeah,
home.
and
That's it. Job's done.
so the easiest way to make an argument against this, is this is a human thing. This is a human construct. This is not a dog thing. There's no animal, there's no predator on this planet that wakes up and says, well, I'm just going to go for a walk for no reason. They're spending calories when they don't, like it just doesn't happen. Like they're spending calories where they don't need to spend calories. And so when my dogs come out of even when my dogs come out of their crate, their assumption is, hey, what are we doing that? And that eagerness is something I get complimented on quite a lot from people watching my videos or people seeing me train in person. They say, oh my God, your dogs are so committed. Your dogs are like so happy, tongues hanging out the side of their mouth and these sorts of things. And it's because there's clear boundaries around the behavior, but also the behavior is so valuable. The behavior of engaging with me as the handler is so valuable to these dogs. And this is why people who get caught up in punishment, oh, you're cruel if you use this tool. It's like, well, look at my dog. My dog is expressing how happy he is in every video that you could possibly find of this dog. And yet your ideological position will not allow you to move even an inch to the point where you say that maybe some context these tools are necessary or in fact beneficial to the dog,
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting conversation.
It is an interesting conversation. I think, because I have to question my own biases as well, my own inherited beliefs. I grew up in South Africa and prong collars are quite common. I think e-collars are quite new-ish.
Relatively.
Yeah, but prong collars was a thing, and it's a way, as far as I understood it, to retain control over your beast, your animal, for lack of a better word.
Probably in South Africa, probably big, powerful boerboels,
Yes.
or dogs of that description. And so this is the thing, like we have people now. I'm not going to call any names out, but we have many big names in the dog training industry that will come onto public platforms and say that these tools are abhorrent. These tools are cruel and just in the nature of them. And what they've never been handed over is a 50-kilogram boerboel that wants to kill people.
Yeah.
And wants to, not doing it because he's scared, not doing it because he's nervous. Because very quickly they would realize that you cannot positively reinforce that dog into living a more stable and safe life. Like the dog needs some boundaries. The dog needs to be told, hey, this is where that boundary is and you can't cross it, bro. You're too powerful. Think about it like Mike Tyson. That's probably a good way of putting it. Mike Tyson was a bit of a thug outside of boxing. If he didn't have boxing, he's very, very famously been quoted as saying, if I didn't have boxing, I would have died. I would have killed myself at some point or another. The structure and the discipline, correct, and the structure and the discipline of learning how to use that violent urge inside of him was actually the thing that saved him in the end. And I think if we could have a proper conversation about these things away from emotional language, people would find a lot of common sense.
And that's all we have time for this week. Join me again next week, Thursday, for part 2. And in the meantime, if you have anything that you'd like to share or add to the conversation, join us on Instagram, which is where I will share little snippets from our conversation in video form. But yes, a gentle reminder, please, let's keep it friendly, kind, and open. And I look forward to meeting you on the other side. Until next time, have a good week.